Good evening, folks. Something that is quite interesting to talk about here. Alright. All the wars that have involved with invading other countries. I mean, look at World War One, World War Two, those countries mostly. Now let's look at the war also involving Ukraine. Compare those two to Ukraine, to the war with Russia and Ukraine. Alright. First, let's start with Germany taking on. And when they said, when World War One first broke out, obviously it was over an assassination of which should have just been jailing the individuals, which technically should have come down to, they should have just jailed them, which they ended up doing, but, whoever would have thought that shot that went around the world would have started an entire war. Weird. But, how it all happened was, the French declared, once the Germany declared war on Serbia, Great Britain then declared, also Russia declared war on Germany, then France, Germany declared war on Russia, then Germany, then France, and Great Britain also declared war on Germany. So, that there was pretty much what started the two Allied fronts, but Belgium declared neutrality, saying, do not come into our country. The two Allied powers. But later on, Portugal entered the war, instead of the United States, along with Brazil, along with many other continental areas. Along with Japan. Japan entered in 1914. In 1917, Brazil and the United States entered their neutrality and entered the war. Canada also entered the war in 1914. In 1915 is when the infamous battle when the other part of the battle began, when Italy sided with the Allies. And Bulgaria sided with, I can't remember who it was, sided with the Central Powers. The Ottoman Empire already entered on the side of the Central Powers when that already occurred. So, what happens here? Let's get down to basics. The war already in place. Battle's already beginning. The start of the war begins. Germany charges into Belgium. They wanted to kind of do like what Hitler did during World War II, do like a little blitzkrieg, except they called it the Schlieffen Plan. The Schlieffen Plan is what they called, was what the original plan was, to eliminate the West so they can focus on the other side, because it was a two-pronged battle. They had one side, they were dealing with Russia on one side, and dealing with the French and the Germans on, not the French and the British on the other side, mostly, or who the main two battle enemies were over there. So, but sure enough, they used Belgium as a prong, and sure enough, they entered through Belgium without Belgium's consent, and once they did that, Belgium declared war. And then, sure enough, Belgium was a walkthrough. They walked right through Belgium. Belgium was a walkthrough. Then, sure enough, we jump right ahead to where Russia was. Russia ended up turning into the Soviet Union. Our relationship with Russia falls apart. We're now literally almost next to enemies, almost. But yeah, now let's talk about what happens. Now we go to World War II. 1918 happens. World War I ends. Treaties are signed. Then we jump all the way 27 years later. I think. I'm not real sure. I'm not real good. Let's see. 1939 subtract. Actually, that'd be 21 years later. Excuse me. 21 years later. 1939. The war begins with Poland decides Hitler decides he wants to invade Poland. And sure enough, he does. And sure enough, it was a walkthrough. But not with the help of Stalin. But sure enough, his strength was strong. I mean, he was strong just like that. I mean, he walked right straight through there without hardly any casualties. He walked straight through Poland with hardly any casualties. But what's different nowadays compared to then? What were the differences between nowadays compared to then? Well, plain and simple. Ukraine. Then we have Russia, which then we fast forward, we go through different war eras of the Cold War. Vietnam. And then first we got Korea, then Vietnam. Then we get all the way, then that pretty much sums up everything. Now we get to, then they go back to being Russia, then the wall gets torn down. That was splitting the city apart and the country of Germany apart, in East Germany, West Germany, East being the communist part, and West being pretty much all the free country, like what we are. Having our rules and our way only. While the East was all authoritarian, and you couldn't get anything you want, kind of like what Russia is today, except they're not communist. They're just more of, next to, you do what I say, or you're dead. Well, here you have it. It all comes down to what happened with Ukraine. Stalin, they pretty much lost every country that was once a part of Russia. Hitler, he's pretty much doing what Hitler is. He doesn't like Ukraine. He wants to get Ukraine back because not only do they have a lot of countryside, they produce lots of milk, they produce lots of oil. Not just oil, but they produce lots of... Ukraine's got a lot of oil population. Ukraine's a pretty decent, a lot of producage over there. A lot of grain, corn. We get a lot of our outports from Ukraine. It's interesting what you believe. If you look up what we get from Ukraine, you'd be surprised what we get from Ukraine. But the difference from the war with Ukraine and the other wars that Russia fought against is plain and simple. The people were armed. The people were armed and ready for them. While Poland, I'm not sure if the people were armed or not, but if they were. But like Hitler said, to conquer a country, we must disarm its citizens. And that's exactly what he did. He disarmed his citizens. If they didn't disarm, shoot them. And those who fought back at the Germans and shot at the Germans and killed Germans, end up getting killed by them eventually because they would run out of ammunition. I can see it happening. These Germans are pretty much, getting ready to start a nice... But they're starting to turn into Dutch Germany. But let's get down to the main point here. An entire tank battalion was pretty much knocked out, including their colonel. Several columns were knocked out. This is almost, if you've ever watched Red Dawn, I strongly urge you. Patrick Swayze is in it. He pretty much leads. They take on the Soviets, Cubans, I think those people. It's a pretty good movie. It came out the same year I was born, in 1984. It's a really good movie. It pretty much sums up kind of like what's going on in Ukraine right now. Except it's 4 guys who literally took on an entire country of... who pretty much literally took out an entire tank battalion. But literally, instead of just 4 guys taking out an entire tank battalion, these guys are literally... They're courageous. I gotta say hats off to these 4 Ukrainians. 4 full-grown adults took out an entire tank battalion. With not only Molotov cocktails, but explosives from other Ukrainians, and they captured tanks that were not damaged, but they killed the Russians that came out of them. They captured them. It's literally like the Russian attack is falling apart. Now, the only Russian battle that literally ever was successful was the Brusilov offensive. How is it successful compared to other battles? Really simple. At night, the Russians snuck up. Brusilov planned this out very particularly easy. What he did was he would have his troops sneak up real close to enemy positions at night and would put them there. And then, when whistles would be blown, that's when the attack began. And sure enough, he was right up on them. This was during World War I, too. In 1916. And sure enough, surprise attack. If he had those kind of plans of attack, instead of just showing complete military in Ukraine, instead of using military tanks, if he used those kind of tactics, oh my gosh, Ukraine would be overwhelmingly taken over by now. I mean, it'd be literally overwhelming right now. Ukraine would have been long gone by now if he would have used those similar tactics. People would have gone into town. Ukraine would have been well overwhelmingly by now. But he didn't do it. Putin just sent troops. Then they kind of fell back from those same kind of tactics. And they went back to the old ways they were doing later on in the battle. And they started losing ground. And lost. Kind of like the Battle of Tannenberg. They're too far spread apart. And everything. And they just got shot constantly. More people died and were captured. And that's just what's going on in Ukraine right now. People are getting shot at. People are getting captured. And people are constantly getting questioned. And one soldier said, one Ukrainian, and they've even made Russian tanks into Ukrainian tanks. And literally you gotta ask yourself one question. How do you make a whole entire... How did you turn this war and end this war? Well, it's plain and simple. Never quit. You don't quit. Unless the enemy actually waves the white flag, which is Russia. The principles for which this country was built on, the United States that is, should not be thrown out the door unless you actually fight. It's that simple. That's all I gotta say. Because Ukraine is really in a good fight. I gotta say hats off to those guys. Everyone in Ukraine. They fought hard. They've beaten back every Russian attack that has almost landed in there. But I'm telling you, if they would take over Ukraine by now, they wouldn't stop. They would take Poland, because Poland was once a part of Russia. So is Ukraine. Kazakhstan, which is, I guess, an ally of Russia now. And a whole bunch of other countries that are over there. Yugoslavia. Plenty of other countries are over there that are once a part of Russia. But, with that being said, I'm out of here. Hit the like bell. Hit the like button. Hit the bell for notifications. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace.